Transition Town Montpelier, along with Vermont Action for Peace and the Kellogg Hubbard Library, are sponsoring tonight's event. This is part of the third Thursday presentation that Transition Town Montpelier puts on together with the Kellogg Hubbard Library when it's not too nice to be out gardening and things like that. So we've got one coming up in March and April and May. You see, anybody else from Transition Town here right now? Remember who's coming up next month? Or Dan, do you? Aaron is not here. Okay. We'll get back to you about that, perhaps at the end of the evening, what's happening next month with our speaker series, but it will probably be back in the Hayes Room at the Kellogg Hubbard Library. We're going to have a great setup of speakers here for you tonight, and lots of time for all of you to talk with each other and pick the brains of our speakers. So I'd like to turn it over to Transition Town Montpelier member Dan Jones, who helped arrange this venue for us.
Hi all, thanks for coming out. We also want to thank Unitarian Church of Montpelier, which you are now sitting in, for giving us the room to do this. The church is making more and more of a commitment to the sustainability argument, if we'll call it, within town, and so we're quite grateful that they've made the space and will make the space available for these kinds of meetings in the future. For those of you who are not familiar with Transition Town, I just want to take a moment to say this is a movement that started in England a number of years ago, about 10 years ago, has been growing into the U.S. with the idea that we are coming to a point where our energy future, our economic future, and our climate future are beginning to merge in some ways that are going to require us to do things differently. We're going to have to go through a transition. So the whole movement here is to start informing us of ways that we have to think about how do we move into that future in a sustainable manner. We would love to have people keep abreast of us. We have a website that's growing. We would like to invite you to participate in these future talks and discussions because we think this is one of the ways that we can help build a sustainable central Vermont. Now, having said that, I'm going to turn this over to back to Carl, or just go to Joseph now?
Why don't you give it to Joseph?
Joseph Gainza, go ahead.
Thank you, Dan. Hi, I'm Joseph Gainza, and I'm with the Vermont Action for Peace, one of the groups that organize this. Just to give you a little bit of context for tonight, in December, as you know, 190 nations, 195 nations in Paris decided that climate change was real and that humans are responsible for a good part of it, and that the nations of the world have to begin to do something serious, and very seriously. In fact, they went beyond earlier descriptions of the problem by saying that we can't even get to 2 degrees Celsius. We need to keep it at 1.5 because it's that bad. Well, how is that going to happen? What are we going to do? And that's the question that people are asking all around the globe. And I think it's a testimony to the activities around the globe of people everywhere who have been in the streets, in the legislative halls, getting people in power to understand that this is a real problem. So what we're doing tonight is just an extension of that. What we're saying is that, okay, now that the nations of the world finally have woken up to this and the leaders of the world are finally beginning to think about taking serious action, what can that action be? And economists around the world have agreed that one of the fastest ways of reducing our carbon emissions is to tax it. When you start taxing it, people begin to use less of it. Well, people here in Vermont have decided that we want to do that on the local level, and so legislation is being proposed and will probably be dealt with at the next legislative session, not this year, about doing just that. But there are problems with taxes, as we all know. Not just political problems, but real economic problems. People at the lower end of the economy struggle very hard, and when you have a regressive tax, like a carbon pollution tax or a sales tax, the people who are struggling the most economically are the ones who are hurt the most. So we don't want that. We want Vermont to be a leader in environmental legislation to bring the rest of the country forward on this issue. We also want Vermont to be a leader in economic justice issues. So how do we marry those two things when we talk about something that we need to do, which is to reduce our carbon emissions? We also want to make sure that those most vulnerable economically amongst us do not suffer, and we don't have this transition on their backs. So tonight's discussion is going to be looking at that. That's why we have 4 speakers here. Sandy Levine is the senior attorney with the Conservation Law Foundation. And before I go on and tell you who else is there, I want to give a shout out to Conservation Law Foundation because they just had a victory for all of us. The development that was proposed in Randolph that would have destroyed good agricultural land has been withdrawn, mainly because of the work of people on the street, but also because of the work of the Conservation Law Foundation. So I just want to have a shout out for that. The other panels the other members of our panel is Karen Lafayette, who's a former legislator, and she told me today, up at the State House for 24 years, both as a legislator and as a lobbyist for the Vermont Low Income Advocacy Council. The Vermont Low Income Advocacy Council is, like the Conservation Law Foundation, a member of Energy Independent Vermont. And they're there to make sure that there is economic equity built into any bill that goes into the State House. So Karen will be here speaking from that perspective. Travenlation is the president of the Green Mountain Central Labor Council. I think that's what it's called. And he's a member of the Teamsters Union and somebody who's been organizing in labor for many, many years. And he's going to be looking at this from the perspective of working families and union people and laboring people. And then at the end, we have Tony Klein, who we appreciate him taking the time because the legislature, of course, is right in the middle of a lot of things. But Tony is a representative from East Montpelier, and he chairs the House Committee on Environment and the Energy, Natural Resources and Energy, I believe it's called. And Tony's going to sum it up by talking about what the political realities of getting such a bill passed and signed by the governor. And then we're going to open it up to you because there's a lot of wisdom in this room. I know a lot of you. And I know you're involved in many various aspects of social and economic justice and environmental justice. And we want to hear from you what you think should be in a bill that would work for everybody here in Vermont. So let's get it started. Sandy's going to start us off.